Welcome to our HQ Live today. Today we have our special guest, Adam Rateliff.
They had me back, everyone.
Adam is one of our national educators. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So today we're talking about Pro Stitcher Designer and all the great things you can do with that. And Adam, tell us why you love Pro Stitcher Designer.
Do I love it? Just kidding, I do. So, Johnny, I'm not an artist. I can sew things together. I can follow a pattern, but I cannot draw. I cannot draw to save my life. I can stitch a feather, but if you make me put that on paper, I just giggle. But I do a lot of quilting, and I do like straight lines. I love straight lines. I would say I'm more of a modern quilter. I don't know if you can tell with my quilts behind us. But designer lets me pull out the stuff from my brain,
right,
or pull out blocks from my quilts, and have Pro Stitcher stitch them really easy.
Right.
So I find myself using designer quite a bit because I'm able to come in, digitize something, and then just take it off to the machine, have it do the hard work, and then I get to go in and do, straight lines, ruler work.
Yeah.
Swirls.
Back to piecing, right?
Yes, back to piecing. I oftentimes have my Pro Stitcher running, and I'm in the piecing in the corner.
Right.
Or Pro Stitcher's running, embroidery machine's running, I'm piecing. Or really, I'm probably eating lots of candy or playing PlayStation.
Okay, thanks.
Those
for
are my
the honesty.
vices.
All right.
Those are my vices.
So let's talk first about this quilt right here. We have the Plus quilt.
Okay.
You digitized this design.
Yeah, so this was a COVID quilt that a shop that I had previously taught at did a quilt along, a mystery quilt, and I said, hey, I have fabric for that. Let's make one. And while I was making it and getting to the final layout, I'm like, oh, I'm going to digitize something. I'm going to digitize a design, and it's nothing fancy. It's just some straight line pyramids. But I was able to digitize that and stitch it edge to edge across my quilt. This is now Barry Fanilow's quilt.
Who's Barry Fanilow again?
Barry Fanilow is my new puppy, or I guess new-ish. She's 10 months now.
Okay.
Barry Fanilow on Instagram. But yeah, he's a little mini poodle, and we laughed because I called Ben. I was teaching last week, and I called and said, hey, I need you to pack up the Plus quilt. And he's like, but Barry's on it. And I'm like, okay, well, wash it, and I need to take it with me. Because this is a good kind of representation of, you can take an element out of a quilt,
right?
For instance, the pluses,
yeah,
and just kind of mirror them or echo them or in some way to create that edge-to-edge design.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Love it.
It's yeah, it was super fun. I ended up uploading it to the mystery quilt site that everyone was using, and said, hey, everyone, if you want to use this design, you can use it too.
Oh, nice.
So I share well.
Very nice.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Not my chocolate.
Well, my Buster is my dog, and he does not have a quilt yet. So, I mean, I better get going.
Yeah. You have a bunch of fabulous quilts you've been making.
I have.
Just let him, the other thing is our dogs lay on all the quilts.
Yeah.
I do laugh because I don't let them, if the quilt is not quilted on the couch, they know not to get on it. So when I'm in my studio and I'm laying quilts out on the ground to measure them and stuff, they'll walk around the perimeter.
Oh, okay. So they know not to get on those.
But as soon as it's quilted and it's on the couch or somewhere not in the studio, it's fair game.
Okay. Let's talk about this one, this diamond quilt.
Right.
What's the orientation of this quilt? Does it have an orientation?
Yes. The corner colored binding always points to the bottom right.
This is the bottom right.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm back. It's upside down and backwards.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So tell us about this.
So this quilt, I went in, I digitized the diamond, and then I used Pro Stitcher and just placed it around.
Okay.
So if you'd like, we can jump into designer. I can show everyone how we digitize, or how I digitize that, and
yeah.
Maybe just kind of jumping back as we talk about the quilts.
Please do. Let's show us how you did that.
All right. So I'm going to go over to my designer program. And this one is a simple diamond shape. This is the actual shape of what the piece is. I made this up, so I just kind of started cutting things and sewing them together, not really knowing how it was going to end up.
Nice.
And I went and I actually measured my diamonds.
Okay.
And I think they were 4 by 2.
All right.
So super easy to do in Designer. Now, if you're watching at home, this is not teaching you how to use Designer. Take a class. Or ProStitcher.com, because now that it's ProStitcher Designer, there are so many great videos on ProStitcher.com.
Right.
I'm always sending people there. And, you know, on Facebook, I always see people like, oh, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do this. And it's always ProStitcher.com, because you can find anything you need there.
Yeah.
And then you ask your question. But I'm going to go over to my tools.
Okay.
In my file tab. And what I love about ProStitcher Designer is that it works like ProStitcher.
Yeah.
Files, ribbon, we have stuff in our sidebar. We're all used to that. So here's the diamond that I already created, but I'm just going to do I'm going to make another one. So I'm going to use my line tool. And this is my favorite tool because I like straight line stuff.
Right.
And to do this, again, I measured it. I knew they were 2 inches wide. So I'm zoomed in so I can use my graph. And I'm going to right click on my ruler and make sure my snap to grid is on, because most of the things I need are going to be perfectly lined up to those grids. And I will place my first point. And that line tool is just going to connect point A to point B to point C. And I'll go around and click where I need those endpoints to be. When I'm done, I can right click. And there's my diamond.
Nice.
Not very hard.
Nope.
Really quick, especially if you're going to do something like this to digitize it. You know, I went in and how many times did 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 different diamonds. I just had to make it once. I can go and preview. I always preview my designs. So preview in the files. I'm going to apply stitches in the ribbon. And I run that stitch out just to check it out. It looks good. And what I love about ProStitcher Designer, and if you're using the new ProStitcher Beta, I can hit this send button, and it's going to send that right over to my ProStitcher program. And there's my design. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love being able to switch right back and forth between the two. Yeah, so this quilt actually glows under a black light because I drew a grid with a fluorescent tailor's marker.
Okay.
And I was able to use my ProStitcher to place them individually. The other thing about Designer is I could have printed this out and made a stencil.
Right.
And then drew my grid, stencil and pounced those diamonds on, and then just stitch them with a ruler.
Yeah.
So I did use a ruler to stitch around the diamonds themselves, or the colored diamonds, and then I just went in with free motion because I love free motion that much.
Nice.
I love a swirl.
You do love a swirl. Okay, what's next?
Oh, look, my little mug rug I made.
Okay, tell us how you did that.
So I'm a big fan of thinking outside the box, and these designs are all included in your ProStitcher. So you have these snowflakes, and you have the little gingerbread man. I did crop out that gingerbread man. I believe it's a gingerbread man and gingerbread woman.
Okay.
And I cropped out, I just wanted one of them. And then I opened a bunch of those snowflakes, and I believe they're under your HQ blocks or PS design blocks. And just moved them around and put them where I wanted. But what I digitized in Designer was the outside, to have this basically do all the stitching at our machine. So I didn't have to do anything other than I top stitched the edges at the end just to make sure everything was closed.
Okay, so you're saying you digitize these squares.
I digitized the squares and had ProStitcher stitch those squares.
Right.
And then I put designs in them. I laid my backing on, had ProStitcher stitch an outside edge, cut it off, turned it out, and then top stitched.
Okay, awesome. Next we have this star, right?
Yes, and it would go like this.
So sorry. Oh, the colored
corner is always
the colored corner. Okay, I'm going to show this so the camera can get in there a little better. So tell us what you did with this one.
So this one, I digitized the star blocks.
Okay.
And we're calling this the PS star.
Okay.
Because it was my ProStitcher star, and I wanted to find out where to find it. So I created those blocks. I knew that I wanted to use that same shape in my negative space. I didn't really know how I wanted to use it. So I took those blocks or I took one of those blocks, digitized it, and was able to kind of audition a few things in that Pro Stitcher, and then come back in, finally place them where I wanted them, and then use the machine to stitch those out. So I stitched them out with those colored threads. So it's just a different, it's Magnifico thread. And I don't do a lot of using different colors. So this was a little bit outside the box for me, because you definitely see it if it messes up.
Yeah.
But because Pro Stitcher was doing it for me, it wasn't that stressful anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, can we show them how I did it?
Oh, yes, please.
All right, so I'm going to flip over to my Pro Stitcher Designer. And again, this one's called PS Star Quilt.
Okay.
And this is the finished design. Again, you kind of have to think of how you want this to stitch out. When I create designs, I like to have a little bit of overstitching at the end of the beginning. Okay. So maybe like a 1/4 inch. So then it does my tie off for me.
Right.
I always tie off anyway, but I do like that little bit of overstitching. So this is a 10-inch square. So how I made this is, let's see if I can get 2 of them on my screen. Maybe. So I'm going to go to my tools, and I'm going to open the artwork tool, and I want a rectangle. And I simply just drew a rectangle. Didn't have to be any size specific, because I'm going to resize it the way I want it.
Okay.
So there's my rectangle. I'll come and select it with my select tool, which is going to be the pointer on the left. And if we look at our artwork on the sidebar, I can come in, click this little box with the squares on the side, which is our transform box. And I'm going to change this to 10 by 10.
Okay.
Right here, it says maintain aspect ratio. And if I were to change this to 10 and hit apply, the height isn't 10 because I didn't make a perfect square. So I want to make sure I turn that off when I'm creating this. I don't need that, the aspect ratio to stay the same.
Right.
I want it to be exactly how I'm going to put it.
Okay.
So I'll hit apply. And now I have my 10 by 10 inch square that I can drag around. And I'm going to stick it just right next to our star. So that was step 1.
Yeah.
Step 2, I knew that the center square area ended at 4 by 4.
Okay.
So I just simply clicked here, and I hit Control Copy, Control Paste, but I will click it on the screen for you to see.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm going to click Copy and then click Paste. And now I have a second design. You can't see it because it does it right on top of itself. So down here, I can click on my sequence view, and I see that I have different artworks. So I'll click the last one. And if you hover right here, it shows you what that artwork is. And those are squares. There's my star. There's another square.
Right.
So I will come back to my transform. I'm going to click that maintain aspect ratio and just change it to 4 and hit apply. And now there's my 4-inch center square. And I just have to go in and add my other pieces. So this is where I will zoom in because I want to see that grid. I use the grid all the time. And
I like that snap to grid too.
Oh my gosh, snap to grid, amazing. And available on Pro Stitcher Beta.
Yes, it is.
So I do know that this outside square is going to be a 5 by 5. So I just started out in the corner, and maybe I'll snap here, or I'll click here. I'm coming in. I have that kind of echoed area square in the outside, and I'm just going to come around, working my way through this star. Now, what happened? Oops, I went outside the lines.
What do you do now?
Backspace. If you tap backspace, it erases that.
Love it.
That point you just put.
Okay.
And I can click to the correct place. And oops, did I think I missed something. Where am I going?
I think it looks all right.
No, I have to go down a 1/2 inch.
Okay.
Ooh, the joys of doing a live, right?
That's amazing.
I get all stressed.
I love it.
But it's just the backspace.
It's just a backspace.
And I will
so
work
easy.
around. Ding, oops, clicked it wrong again.
That's really fast, dude.
So now that I'm here, I have that star, but I do want that center square stitched out. So I can come back in. and click around.
Oh, okay.
And then, like I said, I like to end a 1/4 inch on my line.
Uh-huh.
So I do that little 1/4 inch right there, right click, and there's my design.
And so tell us about stitch order. Do you have that in mind as you're drawing?
Not as I'm drawing, because I can switch it later.
Okay.
So, so if this were me at home, I have my base outside 10-inch square.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to stitch that or do I not? And that's where I'm going to start thinking about how am I going to save this. I'll click my select tool. Right now, our stitch order is the inside square on the left, and then the star on the left, and then the outside square on the right, the inside square on the right, and the star on the right. So usually I wouldn't have this mirror image. So I'm going to pick up these 3 pieces, and I'm just going to do a copy, and we're going to open a new file so we can kind of see this better. So I went File, New. It opened a new window. I had already copied it.
Then you just paste.
So I'm going to paste it. And there's the block that we just made. So this is where I'm going to decide, okay, do I want that outside block? And in my case, I didn't. Right. So if I come into my sequence view on the bottom right, hit my plus, I'm going to have some options. I'll select the square, and then I'm just going to hit delete. And I'm going to take that one off. Now, this is where it gets tricky about your stitch order. Do I want it to stitch the center square first? Do I want it to stitch the outside first? And in this case, it doesn't really matter. I think I stitched the inside and then the outside, maybe. I don't know.
Like I said, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. It's gonna stitch the order that I originally made it. But let's say, so right now it's stitching the inside square and then stitching the outside square. If I didn't want to, if I wanted to stitch the outside first, I could simply left click on that in that artwork for the inside square, drag it down, and now it's stitching the outside and then the inside. So it's super easy to change.
And it's going to stitch in the order you drew them, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I want to make sure. People clarify that a little bit.
So yeah, it will stitch in the order you draw. But again, very easy to change. Just like if I were, and you know, maybe I forgot to do that here in my Pro Stitcher Designer. I could change that stitch out in Pro Stitcher, which is usually where I do most of that stuff. Okay. I'm usually just designing and not thinking that far ahead. Okay. Because you have to have a plan if you do that. So
yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. So what if I don't have a robotic system like Pro Stitcher or another robotic system? How could I use Designer to stitch out that square?
Oh, you just print it. You just print it on your regular paper. Okay. You would take that to your domestic machine. I've actually made, so you're making a stencil. You're going to have it print on your printer. If they're bigger than 8.5 by 11, you just tape those pages together. Right. I virtual teach ruler classes, and I send them like a 4-page stencil that they need to make at home. Yeah, then you would stitch it out in your domestic machine and just have it puncture, take the thread out, and have it puncture those spots, use a pounce pad on it. I've actually just stuck them on my Longarm before and used the Longarm to stitch those. You know, depends on how fast. Stencil. Yeah. You know what makes a great stencil? Well, you're not going to be printing on this, but sometimes I will print it out and then I get golden threads paper. Right. And use that golden threads paper as my stencil because that will take a ton of beating. So that stencil will last a long time. Okay. And you can use multiple layers. So if you maybe you're going to make 100 of these. I might not use the same stencil for all 100. I would maybe make 5 layers and have it do this, or make the stencil with those 5 layers. Right. So, but yeah, that golden threads paper works great.
You could fold the golden threads paper over 5 times,
you can do
it
like
out
15 times,
and then spread it out, and you've made a little, right?
Oh yeah, then you have your pantograph.
A pantograph, and you can make a pantograph out of this as well, right?
Yeah, so you would
if you made an edge to edge.
Yeah, so maybe the pyramid quilt, I could print it out, and again, you're just taping those papers together, and now you have a pantograph. All right. Homemade.
Excellent. Thank you for this. Let's talk about this beautiful thing.
This one's upside down, but just because I made it, so I know that the arrows point down.
Well, I can't see anything different about the binding.
Okay, so this is a special one. I didn't put my little flair in the binding.
Okay, but we're talking about this right here, right?
Yeah, so in this quilt, I don't know if you've noticed I like flying geese.
I haven't noticed. I couldn't tell.
Oh, I did put a hanging sleeve on this one.
Oh, okay.
I like flying geese. I'm not a fan of binding. But look how fun this binding is because it's nice. And I use it was straight lines that I cut on the bias. I love it.
Uh-huh.
So in this quilt, I knew I was going to do just something, some simple rulers.
For our camera people, we want to show this this little spot of flying geese there. Can you see that or no? I need to adjust it a little bit. Okay.
Whatever.
Like that. Right? Okay, so show us how you did that.
All right, so I knew that I wanted to do flying geese to mimic the geese in the quilt.
Right.
So how I did this, and I'll show you on the computer, but I knew how big these geese were, and I wanted everything to stay proportional.
Right.
Because flying geese can be weird, because if you're just starting to make flying geese in your designer, how big do you make them? How tall are they? How wide are they? You know, you start Googling and then you go down this rabbit hole of, ooh, I don't know how the goose is supposed to look. So I knew that some of these were going to be 5 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall. So let's go over to my designer and I will show you how I did this.
Show me how you did it.
So this is just one of them. I think in this quilt, I made them all different sizes.
The flying geese?
Yeah, because there's little tiny flying geese over there.
Oh, I didn't even see that
Maybe I only
one.
stitched in 2 of the phantom rows.
Yeah,
I made the other geese all different sizes. So,
oh, sorry. There we go.
So in this one, I made them in sets of 5. So this is my set of 5. This is 5 inches wide, and if I zoom in, we can see our grid lines. I love grid lines.
Me too.
I am a big fan of grid lines.
Same.
Now, let me show you something. I'm going to move this design. And because I use grid lines, so this design is hanging out over at -11, and I would have to use my brain. Okay?
Nobody wants that.
I love to use my brain, but not on things that aren't fun.
Yes.
Like math. Although I used to be an accountant, so I actually do like math.
Oh.
But when I'm just trying to digitize something, I don't want to use math.
Right. Okay.
Especially if I have snap to grid and grid lines. So if I have this design selected, I can go to my Modify tab, and there's a button that says to origin, and I'm going to click that, and it's going to move it to my 0, 0.
Okay.
So it makes it so much easier to use. And now I know that my left and right are going to be at 2.5, and I just need those 2 inches tall. I use the line tool. It's pretty much the only one I use because I like straight lines. And flying geese are straight lines.
Right.
So let's see. I'm going to slide this over, and I'm going to pick it up by this little X, drag and drop it, and we'll just make a mirror image. So I'm actually going to use the 0 through 5, which will also help me to not have to stress.
Right.
So if I start here, and I'm going to start in the center, so I'm going to start at 2.5 because I want it to stitch down one side and come back.
Okay.
So there's no over stitching on those geese. So I can come out to the edge. So I'm going to click 2.5 from the center, come up that 2.25, and there we are. Come back out to the side, up 2.25, out to the side, up 2.25, and I'm just going to follow this down. The important thing is you need to decide how many you want.
Right.
Especially when you make them this way. Because if I want 3, I can do 3. If I want 8, I can do 4. I can do 2, and then kind of line them up to stitch. But we'll just do 3. We'll say I want 3 this time. I usually hum while I do this. It makes life more fun.
Oh man, I sing all the time. Everybody knows I'm a singer, so humming is good too.
I was singing earlier. So here's my design. I have it set up as 3. Now, because the start and stop are in the center of the very top, this one is probably not a good one to say, okay, I need 6.
Right.
Because I have the start and stop in the same spot.
Yeah.
If I were making these where I wasn't sure how many I wanted, maybe I'm going to make 1 to be able to be stitched multiple times. I would come back to my line tool, and I'm going to, it needs to start in the center of the bottom of the goose.
Okay.
And end at the point. So you're going to have overstitching
right.
if you need it to to connect.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm here at 10, I can come over 2.5, come back to the top at 2.25. Oops. Come over 2.5. Connect to that start point, and then move yourself back out. So I'm just traveling over and traveling back up.
You go back the same way?
I did go back the same way. I just have to be able to connect this point back to that, to the start.
Mm-hmm.
I could have went around. I usually go back, and then I get really weird and I'll like flip it. Like the second one will be flipped.
Because I think that's what we did here.
Yeah, because you can see the overstitching.
I can see overstitching on one
the
side,
other side.
but every other side. So
it depends on what my mood is that day.
Okay.
But again, when I get these, I always go to my preview tab, assign some stitches, and stitch it out because I want to see how that stitch out's going to work. Sometimes if I'm not zoomed in, it'll snap to grid like a 1/4 inch away, and I didn't actually close that design. Very easy to go back in and fix.
Right.
But this type of goose is how I created the geese on my carpal tunnel quilt.
Okay.
Because they aren't specifically in a certain spot. So I was able to use my Pro Stitcher, open that one design and duplicate it. And I just went through and added where I wanted them to go.
So tell us how you did these phantom flying geese here, Adam.
So I made that one goose unit like I had previously done, or like I showed you.
Okay.
And I was able to place them in here one by one, lining up those start and end points. Because we know in Pro Stitcher, we like those start and end points to line up. And then once I got them where I needed them, I was able to have Pro Stitcher just stitch that. And then I went in with the ruler and did my echoes because I could have digitized that echo, but they're not the same anywhere around. I just kind of threw it in how I wanted it to go. In the semicircles, I was able to set up one because all the semicircles were paper piece, so I know they were all the same size.
Right.
And it was very easy to kind of go in, and I drew with my HQ iron off pencil.
Okay.
The center line, I just grabbed a ruler and used that to mark that center line. So I was able to place the point on that center line, and then if I needed to turn that goose or anything just a little bit, I used my like nudge and my, I call it rotate nudge. I don't know the technical term for it.
Yeah, probably good.
The mini rotate where you can change
slightly.
The slightly rotate on the bottom right of your rotate tab in your sidebar. I use that one a lot. Yes. We're going to call it rotate nudge.
Rotate nudge is a good one.
Rotate nudge to put them in the right order. So once I set this design up, I saved it. I saved all those geese as a design because I was able to reuse it. These ones, again, I didn't. I just had Pro Stitcher stitch it out because
did you just draw this freehand? Did you freehand that at all? Or did you draw this in at all or just kind of do it
I think
sight?
I might have maybe made a line. Again, I used that fluorescent Taylor's marker. So I might be able to, if we put that on here, we might see a few lines.
On black light? Okay.
Yeah. And then right here, I didn't even have to draw any lines. I just stuck this first one in the center and then repeated it.
Okay.
So, which is very nice because of how they were set up. It was a design that was repeatable. But I say use Pro Stitcher smarter and quilt smarter, not harder. So if I can have Pro Stitcher do something for me, I always do it. In this case, if I knew how big this was, I would have set this up in Designer. Maybe you don't have Pro Stitcher. Set this up in Designer, print it out, and make that stencil.
Right.
And now you have the stencil for the whole quilt. And there's a few places here where you get an extra curve. This one's a little different because how this curve swings in and out. But if it were some of the other ones, I could just use 1/4 of that stencil.
Right.
So, but I wanted all of this to kind of interact together.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
I love this quilt. I love this quilt, and I'm sad that it's staying here with you for a while.
It is?
It is.
Oh, I'm hanging it above my desk.
So, as long as I get pictures.
Okay.
I'll have to check on my baby.
Okay, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you here for HQ Live. How can we find you online?
So, I am everywhere, Adam So Fun, and that's SEW. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram.com, Gmail, all of them. I'm
all
just
the
everywhere.
Things.
I'm
okay,
everywhere. You can't get rid of me.
We try really hard, you guys. No, I'm just kidding. So you can find Adam literally everywhere. Adam is one of our national educators, and we're so glad to have him here. If you see a class from him, make sure you sign up. He's a great post-it trainer, instructor, so he does a great job.
Oh, thank you.
And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next month for another HQ Live.
Bye, everyone.